Hello, grade eights. So for this part of the Renaissance unit, we're going to be looking at Renaissance art. So I'm just going to share my screen. So for today, we're going to be learning about Renaissance art and looking at the question, how were Renaissance ideals reflected in the arts during the Italian Renaissance? So the first thing that I want you to do is I want you to look at these photos. We're going to return to these ones later, but I want you to look at them and think, which one doesn't belong? There's no right or wrong answer, so take a look at these different pieces of art and think to yourself, which one doesn't belong? So to give you a background of the Renaissance art is how did it come to be? So at this time, families paid artists to produce portraits or moments in history, things like paintings, sculptures, architecture, literature. And a lot of the times these artists became celebrities, and they're still celebrities today, just like the Mutant Ninja Turtles logo we have here. So the question is, how were Renaissance ideals reflected in the arts during the Italian Renaissance? So there's three things we're going to be looking at. It's classicism, realism and expression, which is known as proportion, or perspective. So classicism, as we know, is the Renaissance is another word for rebirth. And this rebirth means that artists started to study elements of ancient Greek and Rome, things like humanities, science, and math. So an example of this is we have the statue of the Venus de Milo, which was from about 100 BCE, which is an ancient Greek statue. Where 1500 years later, we have the statue of David, which we can see looks very similar to the one prior. Next, we have realism and expression, which is proportion. So this means making subjects and the background look more realistic. So we have things like Leonardo da Vinci's Vitruvian Man, showing the ideal body proportion in art. So artists started using science and math to show proportion. They wanted things to look more realistic than they were in the past. So an example of this is another statue of David by Bernini, who is showing David fighting against the Goliath. And we can see him here, he's in battle, so his face, he's got a lot of facial expressions. Where on the other side, we have the medieval painting, where we can see we have a priest and some of his followers. You can look at them, their body shapes, they're all nice and tall and slender. Their feet and hands don't really look realistic. They all have the same expressions on their face, but also in the background, we can see that they're a lot taller than the buildings around them. This leads into the last point we have is perspective, making things in the distance smaller than the things closer to the viewer, making things look more three-dimensional. So on the one here, you can see the subjects on the front. There's the man kneeling down, and we can see that they look large, they look more realistic. The row of people behind them, you can see they're a little bit smaller because from our perspective, they're further away, so they should be smaller. But then again, the buildings in the background are larger, making it look more realistic. People are not as tall or taller than buildings. Where on the other hand, we have this painting here, a medieval painting of where the king is in the middle, and the king is the biggest thing in the actual painting. Where around it, you can see that there's two gentlemen standing in front of a house, clearly taller than the house. There's a man riding a horse who's a lot smaller than the house and about the same size as a sheep. So you can see the perspectives and even the proportions are off in these paintings. So with the Renaissance, a big thing is the art. So I wanted to go down with some of the famous arts and artists and show you some of their famous work. So we have Leonardo da Vinci, who painted the Mona Lisa, which is maybe one of the most famous paintings, and The Last Supper. We have Donatello, who is very known and talented sculptor or sculptress. He made a lot of sculptures, and here are two examples of very detailed sculptures that he did. Raphael, one of his most famous pieces, is the School of Athens. This one is a symbol of the Renaissance because we have Plato and Socrates, who are kind of symbols of Greek knowledge in the center of this photo and kind of showing another rebirth in Greek learning. The last one is Michelangelo, who is known for the statue of David, and I included this one again, and especially the hand, to show the amount of detail he went in there, showing things like the vein in David's hand, which lots of detail, but also the Sistine Chapel, which is one of his most impressive works that he did in the Vatican City, and he painted this one majority of the time on his back looking up. So the one thing I want you to do now is I want you to look at these two paintings. We can see they're both actually depicting the same scene, which is the Last Supper. But what I want you to do is looking at these paintings, and when you submit your assignments, is I want you to look at this table and think, what is unique about the medieval art what is unique about the Renaissance art, and what are some similarities between the paintings. This one, the PDF will be attached in the description below. You can fill out the chart, the blank chart that's on that PDF, and then submit it to my email when you're done.